The lamp in your hand is a bowl of burning animal fat. Its flame is smaller than your thumb. Behind you, the last gray light of the entrance disappeared 20 minutes ago. You are half a kilometer inside the earth, crawling through a passage so tight your shoulders scrape both walls at once. Why would anyone do this? There is no food down here, no water, no shelter worth the risk. And yet, roughly 40,000 years ago, people just like you did exactly this over and over. For thousands of years. By the end of this, you'll understand why scientists now believe these deep caves were never art galleries at all, and why the artists were almost certainly not who you've been picturing. Keep crawling. The passage opens into a chamber the size of a house. You raise the lamp, and there on the wall, a horse gallops through the flickering light. A bison turns its head. A lion stares back at you. Someone painted these in total darkness by the light of a flame smaller than your thumb, in a place that took real physical risk to reach. The oldest dated mark in a European cave is a simple red disc in El Castillo Cave in Spain. It's about the size of a saucer. It is at least 41,000 years old. Let that number settle. Writing is about 5,000 years old. Farming is about 12,000. This little red disc is older than both of them combined 3 times over. Before your ancestors planted a single seed or wrote a single word, they were already climbing into the dark to paint. And here is the first question that should bother you. Why so deep? If cave paintings were decoration, you would paint them where people live near the entrance in the daylight. Some paintings are found there, but many of the most powerful images sit in the deepest, hardest chambers past crawl spaces and drops and freezing underground streams in places where no one ever lived. At Chauvet Cave in France, home to some of the most breathtaking animal paintings ever found, the walls are roughly 36,000 years old, and the great panels sit far from the light. Whoever painted them wasn't decorating a home. They were traveling somewhere. But that's not the strange part. The strange part is the hands. Across Europe and as far away as Indonesia, ancient people left hand stencils on cave walls. The method was simple and intimate. You press your hand flat against the cold rock. You fill your mouth with crushed ochre, a natural red or black pigment mixed with water, and you spray it over your own hand, leaving a perfect negative silhouette. A signature in reverse. When you pull your hand away, the wall keeps its shape forever. At Gargas Cave in the French Pyrenees, there are 231 of these hand stencils, and 114 of them are missing fingers. Not 1 or 2 hands, half of them. Some are missing 1 finger segment, some are missing 3 fingers down to the knuckle. For over a century, researchers argued about what this meant. Was it ritual mutilation? Fingers deliberately cut off as sacrifice? Was it frostbite? This being the Ice Age after all, was it disease? Then researchers noticed something that shouldn't fit any of those stories. Among the positive handprints in European caves, the ones made by dipping the hand in pigment and pressing it to the wall, not a single one is missing a finger. If fingers were really being lost to frostbite or sacrifice, the damage should show up everywhere. It doesn't. The missing fingers only appear in stencils, where a finger can simply be folded down against the palm, which means the hands might be talking. In 2021, 2 linguists, Ricardo Etchepara and Aritz Erurtsun, published a study in the Philosophical Transactions of the Royal Society testing exactly this idea. They analyzed the biomechanics of every hand shape stenciled at Gargas, ranking each position by how hard it is to hold in the air without support. Their finding was quiet and stunning. Every single configuration on the walls of Gargas is a shape a human hand can comfortably make in midair. The contorted, impossible positions that would need the wall for support are completely absent. That is exactly the pattern you'd expect if these weren't damaged hands at all, but hand signs. Deliberate gestures, possibly a sign system used in daily life the way hunters in some modern foraging societies still use silent hand signals when speech would scare the prey. A code pressed onto stone 30,000 years before the first alphabet. Here's where it gets stranger still. In a German cave called Hohenstein-Stadel in 1939, excavators found fragments of mammoth ivory in a dark chamber almost 30 meters from the entrance. It took decades to piece the fragments together. What emerged is now called the Löwenmensch, the Lion Man. It is a figure about 31 centimeters tall with the body of a human and the head of a cave lion. It is between 35 and 40,000 years old, the oldest known statue on Earth. Stop and think about what that object actually is. A lion-headed human has never existed. Whoever carved this wasn't copying anything they had ever seen. They were carving something that existed only in the mind. And modern experiments tell us the cost. Researchers who recreated the figure using Ice Age flint tools found it took around 400 hours of skilled work. 400 hours during the Ice Age when every daylight hour mattered for survival. Someone in that community was allowed. Maybe even required to spend months carving an imaginary being. That only happens if the imaginary being matters to everyone. Archaeologists like David Lewis Williams believe objects like the Lion Man point to something specific: shamanism. A shaman, in the anthropological sense, is a person believed to cross between worlds, entering a trance to visit the realm of spirits, and return with power or knowledge. Half human, half lion is exactly what a shaman mid-transformation would look like, and Lewis Williams, together with the French cave art expert Jean Clotz, pushed the idea one level deeper. Drawing on neuroscience, they pointed out that the human brain in deep trance reliably produces a sequence of hallucinations. First, geometric patterns, dots, grids, zigzags, spirals, then familiar shapes. Then in the deepest stage, animals, monsters, and hybrid beings often experienced as passing through a tunnel or a membrane into another world. Now look back at the cave walls. Geometric signs everywhere, the same handful of shapes repeating across a continent for 30,000 years. Animals, hybrid creatures like the Lion Man and the part-human figures painted in French caves, all of it placed deep underground at the end of a long dark tunnel on the far side of real physical ordeal. In this theory, the cave wasn't a gallery. The cave was the tunnel. The rock face was a membrane, a thin skin between this world and the spirit world. Painting an animal on the wall was fixing a vision where the two worlds touch, and pressing your hand to the stone was touching the other side. Would you have believed the wall could hear you? Your ancestors may have. And they didn't just believe it about caves. At a site called Sungir in Russia, about 34,000 years ago, a community buried 3 of its people, a man and 2 children, in graves that stagger archaeologists to this day. The man was covered in roughly 3,000 beads carved from mammoth ivory. The children were buried head to head with more than 10,000 beads, plus ivory spears, carved animals, and ornaments, everything dusted in red ochre. Experimental work suggests each bead took the better part of an hour to make. Do the math, and you get years of communal labor buried in the ground on purpose. You do not dress the dead in treasure and give them weapons unless some part of you believes they are going somewhere and will need them. Sungir is not proof of an afterlife belief, but it is proof that people were acting at enormous cost exactly as if they held one. So the promise from the beginning is ready to be paid. The caves were not galleries. The deep placement, the trance imagery, the membrane-like use of the wall, the impossible beings, the treasure-filled graves together. They point to the same conclusion: these were humanity's first temples. The paintings weren't decoration, they were ritual. Religion in some form is not 5,000 years old or 10. It is at least 40,000 years old, older than farming, older than towns, older than writing. One of the very first things your species ever built. And the artists? For a century, nearly everyone assumed they were men, mighty hunters painting mighty prey. Then archaeologist Dean Snow of Pennsylvania State University measured the finger proportions of the hand stencils themselves, using the fact that male and female hands differ in the ratio of the index and ring fingers. In his sample of measurable stencils from caves in France and Spain, about 3/4 of the hands were female. The sample was small, and scientists still debate it. But sit with the image it suggests. Deep in the dark, lamp in hand, pressing her palm to the membrane between worlds, the first spiritualist in your family line may well have been a woman. Now the modern mirror. You still do all of this. You light candles in dark, quiet buildings and lower your voice without being told. You travel to places that are hard to reach because being there feels different from seeing a picture of it. You visit graves and bring things the dead cannot use. You press your hands into wet cement and scratch your name into wood because some part of you needs the wall to remember you were here. 40,000 years of technology have changed everything about how you live. They have changed almost nothing about this. Somewhere in a French hillside tonight, in absolute darkness, a red handprint is still holding its shape on the stone fingers folded into a sign we can no longer read. The lamp went out 40,000 years ago. The message is still on the wall, and the hand that left it was reaching for the same thing you still reach for in the dark when no one is watching. Proof that you are more than a body, proof that something is listening on the other side of the wall.